On July 1st, 1997, after 155 years of British sovereignty, Hong Kong returned to China. It did so as a special administrative region under the one country, two systems model. A model whose goal was to ensure that Hong Kong would continue being Hong Kong, the freest city on the entire Asian continent. That means that thanks to this particular political model, Hong Kong has its own laws, its own justice system, its own police force, its own currency, and even has its own customs and immigration policy that is very different from the rest of China. So in the day-to-day operations of Hong Kong, it works pretty much as an independent country. And, well, it's going to remain that way until at least the year 2047. Maybe that's why, since Hong Kong passed into Chinese hands, that things have gone pretty well in the city. Over the past 20 years, Hong Kong's economy has grown by an average of 3.3% per year. More than 1 million people have moved from mainland China to this territory in search of fortune, and the city is still an oasis of freedom. Yet, the influence and the interference of the Chinese government in local politics has grown a lot in recent years. Now, here on VisualPolitik, we already talked about this. For example, in past videos, we discussed the Umbrella Revolution and Beijing's growing interference in local politics. Well, if you were in the video today, we're going to talk about another standout feature of this place. I mean, did you know that Hong Kong is the city with some of the most expensive and also the smallest houses in the world? Well, listen up.
A rising market.
With 7.5 million inhabitants and more than 1,200 skyscrapers, homes in Hong Kong are terribly expensive. And it's not just homes, garages, offices, and anything else that has to do with the real estate sector is incredibly expensive. So much so that we can find news like this.
Hong Kong parking spot sold for record $600,000.
Alright, so let's assume that you have $1 million and you wanted to buy an apartment in one of the city's nicer areas. Well, in that case, you'd barely be able to afford 22 square meters or 236 square feet. And that's for $1 million. When considering cities with the most expensive premium homes in the world, Hong Kong places second only behind Monaco.
Alibaba chief buys his own Aladdin's cave. Jack Ma purchases Hong Kong's most expensive home for $193 million.
But of course, if we take into account that all kinds of people live in Hong Kong and skip Monaco's very particular case, Hong Kong is by far the city with the most expensive homes in the world. To give you an idea, since 2003, the price of housing in Hong Kong has risen by 450%, and today the average price per square meter exceeds $16,000. That's the equivalent of $1,486 per square foot. Yep, that means that if you want to buy a normal 90 square meter house, nothing particularly fancy, you have to pay at the very least $1.5 million, which is quite the mortgage. Now, it's very common to compare which cities are more or less accessible by counting how many years of average wages before taxes we need to buy an average home. Well, so let's have a look at Hong Kong. According to the latest data, in order to buy a house in Hong Kong, you'd need more than 18 years of full wages. For comparison, in cities like Tokyo or Singapore, one needs less than 5 years of wages. In other words, Hong Kong's situation is totally crazy. And not only that, since prosperity is so expensive and inaccessible for Hong Kong's own citizens, they've had to buy smaller and smaller homes. And speaking of smaller homes, could you guess what the average surface area for a home in Hong Kong is? What would you guess? 100 square meters? 80? 60? Well, all of those figures are sky high. The reality is that that's 42 square meters or 452 square feet. Can you imagine living in a house that small? Well, in that case, check out the latest trend.
Hong Kong is so expensive that architects are building 100 square foot tube homes made from concrete water pipes.
Alright, so some of you might now be thinking, well, Simon, that's really small, but I'm pretty sure that's because people live alone in tiny apartments, which alters the statistics, right? Well, no. On average, almost 3 people live in a 42 square meter or 425 square feet apartment, which is pretty darn insane. And it's not only the homes, the same thing happens with offices.
Hong Kong's skyscraper sells for record $5.2 billion US.
But of course, having said that, you might now be wondering, well, why the hell are homes so expensive in Hong Kong? Well, listen up.
The lack of land, a myth?
Massive skyscrapers, tiny and ludicrously expensive apartments. This is how we could pretty much describe Hong Kong. Don't you agree? I mean, after all, we're talking about one of the most densely populated places in the world. Alright, so many people, very little space, pretty much a perfect combination for super high prices, right? Well, hold on just a moment because, well, dear viewer, this is not the whole truth. The truth is that less than 25%, that is a quarter of Hong Kong's territory, is urbanized, and only 7% of the entire territory is occupied by urban housing. Outside the crowded areas, we find countryside, jungle, old villages, golf courses, and many, many single-family homes. Alrighty then, so, well, how is this all possible? Well, you see, for years, Hong Kong was considered to be the freest economy in the entire world, according to the Index of Economic Freedom. We're talking about a place with low taxes, free trade, legal security, and a very small amount of government intervention. Yup, Hong Kong is a highly capitalist city. That's why it's the third largest financial center in the world, after only London and New York. By the way, fun fact here, the Basic Law, Hong Kong's constitution, limits the government so that it can't spend more than it makes. This means that the government usually closes every year with a surplus. Indeed, this has led it to save so much surplus that it has over $220 billion in reserve. Yep, unlike many other countries around the world, Hong Kong does not have public debt. Alright, but fun facts aside, let us continue. The fact is that despite so much freedom and so much commitment to capitalism, there's a sector in which the government has intervened a lot. And I'm betting because you've been watching this video for some time now that you can probably guess what that is. Yes, it is the real estate sector. You see, the government owns practically all of the land in Hong Kong. Government authorities control how much land is put on the market and when it can be built upon. And of course, the Development Bureau decides what can and what cannot be built. Now, generally, land concessions, they're given through auctions. These are generally for private homes, offices, or commercial uses, or they are done directly through agreements with developers when public housing with lower rental prices is going to be built, which is where a large part of Hong Kong's population lives. And it's normal, even in auctions, for the property to continue being government property, as they are granted a right of use for an unspecified number of years. So, sure, homes being so expensive in Hong Kong has a lot to do with scarcity, but it's not due to a geographical shortage. It's due to governmental decision-making. There's plenty of land to develop new residential and office areas, and there's always the option of gaining ground at sea. Yes, in Hong Kong, reclaiming land from the sea is not a strange thing to do. Indeed, a quarter of all the built-up areas of Hong Kong are on land that was reclaimed from the sea. But the government, they decide absolutely everything.
The shortage of land is a myth. There are over 200 hectares of land available for building in the urban areas. The shortage of housing is real, but that is because of deliberate manipulation of the market by the government. John Wright, barrister and chairman of Friends of Sai Kung.
Well, in recent decades, as we mentioned before, Hong Kong's population has grown a lot because many people have come in from China. In addition, family size has decreased, and many Chinese investors want to invest in this city, which is known for its legal security. All of this has led to a rise in demand, but not supply. This is simply because the government doesn't want to do it.
Home prices will continue to grow due to limited supply. Thomas Lamb, Senior Director at Knight Frank.
Well, now the question has to be, well, why is the government interested in restricting supply and increasing prices? Well, there are at least two reasons. The first is that auctions are a great business for the public purse. In 2017, for example, 1 out of every $5 from public revenues came from the sale of land. And we're talking here about $15 billion. The second reason, which is much more sinister, is that there are suspicions of not very clean relations between the authorities and large promoters. And in some cases, these suspicions have led to convictions.
Hong Kong property magnate Thomas Kwok back in jail for bribing city's number 2 official.
You see, the real estate sector in Hong Kong is held in very few hands. Hands that belong to multi-billionaires. In fact, 17 of the 14 biggest estate magnates in Asia are from this city. And well, these big businessmen prefer to keep prices sky high and avoid competition, something that happens when the government brings very little land to market and, in addition, increases any new project's bureaucracy. That way, small and medium-sized enterprises can't enter the market, and foreign companies simply don't dare to because they'd have a clear disadvantage. And, of course, to viewer, as you might imagine, all of this has pretty severe consequences.
The consequences.
The crazy price of housing has meant that despite having a lot of employment and high wages, many people live in difficult conditions, like families having to live in 40 square meters, that's 431 square feet, homes, while paying exorbitant mortgages. The system has also led many people, especially the youngest ones, to depend on the government's public housing. And as you might imagine, these are particularly small. And do remember that in Hong Kong, there's no chance of living on the outskirts or in remote areas, because that would mean crossing over to mainland China and losing all of the freedoms that people have in this city. And as if that was not enough, the high price of offices and business buildings has caused many companies and many investments to end up in other cities of the Pearl River Delta, such as Shenzhen, which poses problems for the future. But that is a whole video that we could do another time. But anyway, dear viewer, that's how things are in the city that, until now, has been one of the most prominent beacons of prosperity and freedom in Asia. Only the future is going to tell us whether this will continue to be. And you know what? We're going to be keeping a very close eye here at VisualPolitik. But now it's your turn. Do you think that Hong Kong's authorities should encourage growth by increasing the supply of real estate? Well, leave your answer in the comments below as well as in this survey. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.